around about, we'll go from about 12-13 meters down to about 16-17 meters maybe. Okay. Depends on how far we get. Very pretty area. It's like a massive big bombing. It's actually got a swim through. Okay. So what I'll do is when we get down there, I'll tie up a buoy line on top of the reef. And then I'll swim through. Then you'll see, because you need to go in the one side and come out the other side. When you come out is quite narrow. Okay, so when you do come out, remember, well, that's if you go through. Remember your cylinder's quite high on your back, so go down nice and low and come out so you don't bang your cylinder on the cave. It's not a huge cave. I mean, it's probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 meters long, and it's full of holes on top. So there's lots of light and there's a big hole coming out the side. So it's not a real cave.
You don't need a torch for it.
No. Not at all.
Torch with if you want to shine on the roof. You might find
the colours are amazing underneath. Always good to take a torch. But yeah, so there's the big body where the cave is, and then there's another big body behind it, and then we'll kind of cruise down south from there and you'll see how far we get. There's a place, if you look at the middle there, the low salmons to the right, that long patch in the middle of the sand. That's kind of where we end up, and there's another cave there that sometimes there's white-tipped reef sharks. Okay, so I'll have a look and see. If you're lucky, we'll find it. Right, on salmons, you'll always find trumpet fish. Okay, trumpet fish aren't necessarily yellow. Okay, in actual fact, they're more common in that brownish sort of olivey green kind of color, but they can change color to yellow. Okay, typically when they're hunting in amongst the yellow fish.
The common to find them together, because earlier we had a brownish one and a yellow one together.
Yeah. They can change colour, you see. So they. Okay. Then all the snappers, there's a humpback snapper, blue banded snappers, dory snappers, and yellow snappers. In that whole area, you'll see them swimming around in big bunches, and then with them, the flame goatfish. Okay, he also hangs above the reef in big schools, and you'll see them together there. Okay. Then, normally inside that cave, or just on the outside of the cave, this guy here is called a slender barkman. Okay, they can get quite big. I think the maximum size is 70 centimeters. These guys are a little bit smaller. They're probably about that size. They're still youngish ones. It's called a barkman. I mean, Afrikaans, obviously a man with a beard, a little peg underneath his chin. Okay, it's about 1 centimeter long and about as thick as a match. And what he does is he's nocturnal, so during the day they're basically sleeping. And then at night they go off on the sand, and then they drag this peg through the sand, and it's like an external tongue. So they actually taste the crustaceans and things that are underneath the sand. And sometimes off salmons get schools of these half moon or raccoon butterfly fish. So sometimes you do, not always. Then the mafia on the reef. Okay, there's bluefin kingfish. Okay, they chase the hell out of the other fish. Okay. They love those flame goatfish. Okay, so wherever you've got accumulations of flame goatfish, you always see these guys cruising around. So if you see the yellow fish, like either drop down or suddenly swim off to the side, look around, and there's always a kingy that's cruising through. Okay. Right, then the other interesting thing on salmons, we've only got 2 anemone fish in South Africa, and those are those 2 guys there. So it's they're called the nose stripe anemone fish, and then the 2 bar anemone fish. The nose stripe's got a white line that goes all the way up his nose and his back. And what's interesting, you'll see both of them on salmon. But what's interesting is the way anemones reproduce. Okay, so first of all, let me tell you a story about the anemone fish. The anemone's got stinging cells that can actually kill fish. Okay, so it can catch them and sting them, and then they actually eat them. Right now, the anemone fish lives inside the anemone. What they do is, as juveniles, they start rubbing themselves on the underside of the anemone. Okay, and they start absorbing the mucus from the anemone. Slowly but surely they get onto the sort of stingy side and keep on absorbing the mucus until eventually the anemone thinks that the fish is part of itself, because it can only feel its own mucus on it, it taste it, okay? So that fish is now acclimatized to that anemone. It can't then swim off to another anemone. It's going to have to go through that whole process again, because that anemone would then realize, but hang on, this guy is not part of me, okay? But no, anemones reproduce in two different ways. Obviously, the normal way is they release eggs, and some release sperm. The sperm fertilizes the eggs, lands, and they grow into anemones. Okay. The interesting thing is anemones can actually move. They're not permanently connected to the reef like the corals. Okay. So anemones kind of stick themselves onto the reef, and if they do want to move, they just loosen themselves, and they can actually close completely like a ball. But it also allows them to actually swim away if you like. Okay. But the other way that they reproduce is what we call asexual reproduction, which means without sex. Okay, so quite boring. But what happens is on the underside of the anemone, it grows like a little bud. Okay, and it's called budding. And what happens is it's actually a little anemone, but it's obviously an exact copy of this anemone. Okay, and then it breaks off and it lands and it grows. Now, those two anemones have got exactly the same DNA. Okay, so that allows the anemone fish now to swim between the two anemones. Okay. Now on salmons, you're going to see there's a patch that's about this size. Okay. And I'll show it to you. There's about 60 anemones. They've got to be all from the same original anemone, because you'll see the anemone fish swimming from the one to the other quite happily like that. Okay. So it's quite interesting to see, because it's not something you see very often. Right, so the our time, 55 minutes until time out. Well, it's good.